If y'all would go ahead and open your Bibles to the book of 1 Timothy. We'll be there once again, and today we're going to be in chapter 6. Before we dive into the sermon, I do want to say a couple of things. For those of you here, you may not know, we have a regular online audience as well. And I want to just make a couple of quick notes to our online audience here before we go any further. First of all, Debbie Thompson. Deb, we love you. We're praying for you. We hurt for you. And we're just praying that God will grant you some healing. And then secondly, the Sider family, some dear friends of ours, and they are regularly participating with us online as well. They had a new grandson here about a week ago. And we're just continuing to celebrate with them in all of that. So for all of us here, we should always remember that not only is the church bigger than just what's in these four walls, but our congregation, I mean, these are people who really feel like they're a part of what we're doing here at Sutphin Mill, even if they're hardly ever able to be here. And Debbie in particular used to come somewhat, like every 2 or 3 months. Debbie and Terry would try to join us, and Debbie's just not able to get out. So we just want you to know we love you all. If you're watching online, God bless you, and we're glad that you're a part of what's going on. So again, 1 Timothy chapter 6. I'm going to give you a phrase here real quick. If you take notes, if you're writing something down, this might be something worth jotting down here. I want us to consider today the undue influence of a bad example. Okay, so here's the quick illustration. So Friday was a rough day at the Brundage household. Lots of things went wrong, lots of different struggles that happened on Friday. But on Friday, my day was just kind of capped off while I was driving. I feel like, and I at least try to be a fairly patient guy, but put me behind the wheel, and I've got people around me making poor decisions. I mean, Friday I was getting cut off left and right, and I'm trying to be a good driver, trying to be a patient driver. I was driving a 1-ton bus on Friday, and it seemed like everybody was trying to check and see how good my brakes were. You know what I'm talking about. Well, this was all capped off. So I'm in Salina. I'm on 9th Street. I'm going north about where Harbor Freight is. There's my shout out to Harbor Freight, one of my favorite places to shop, okay? But I didn't stop there this day, all right? So we can't blame it on that. But I'm going north on 9th Street. And 9th Street at that point in Salina goes from 2 lanes going each direction down to there's 1 lane going straight, but then there's a right turn lane there. And the right-hand lane is marked right turn only. There's several signs. There's markings on the road. And as we're coming up to there, I carefully got into the left lane at the appropriate time, and there's a whole line of cars waiting at the stoplight. Okay? As I'm there waiting at the stoplight, I'm not going to tell you what color car it was, but it was a distinctive vehicle with an out-of-state tag. Pulls into the right lane with their left turn signal on the whole time. They knew exactly what they were doing. They passed everybody who was waiting for the light, hit the light right as it turned green, cut in front of everybody else, and headed on up the road. Now, I'm mad. So I did what any normal, sane person does. I made note of that car, and I followed him. Now, I wasn't going to do anything. But it's just like, okay. So I follow this car, and it just goes just a couple of blocks and turns into the KW, Kansas Wesleyan campus. And they stop right in front of one of the main admin buildings. A guy gets out of the passenger side, then the driver pulls on up into one of the parking areas. It's a KWU student. Now, here's my point, okay? What do I think of KWU students now? What do you think about how college students drive? What do you think about how out-of-state drivers come into Salina? We got a nice little town here. You know, we all are polite with each other for the most part. We treat, and they're coming in from out of town and they're ruining stuff for us, right? These are the thoughts that I have running through my head. The undue influence of a bad example. Because there's probably a lot of college students that are really good drivers. They're very thoughtful and considerate and patient and kind. There's probably a lot of students and professors and administrators at Kansas Wesleyan University that are great people, love the Lord, serving Him. They want to make Salina a better place. They want to make our communities a better place. But all it took for me was to see that one bad example. And I'm thinking all of these negative thoughts. Today, we are going to get the opportunity to consider the example that we are giving of Christ. And in the place where we spend the most of our time. Okay, we're going to talk today about work. And how our work can be a witness for Christ, or our work can be a bad example that puts Christ into this perspective that the world around us sees in a very negative way. Our work can either be a testimony or a travesty. And I want us to consider very carefully what our witness is showing while we're doing our jobs, while we're laboring. Are we laboring for Christ, or are we showing a bad example? Now, I know this is not a Sutphen Mill problem. We've all got the best attitudes when we go to work. We all work very diligently, and we're all wonderful people. But in the big city, I'm sure there must be a problem there. Not us, right? So maybe this is just for our online audience. Maybe this isn't something for, maybe we all need to have a quick reminder about what it is to work for the Lord and not for man. Would you all pray with me as we begin our study here? Our Father in heaven, as we dig into your word today, I pray that you will help me to find the right words. Help us all to come before you in humility, striving to be the men and women that you want us to be, that the world might see you through us, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. 1 Timothy chapter 6 today. And we're going to begin today by talking about the contract of labor. Labor is a contract by the very nature of the case. The contract of labor. Chapter 6, verse 1. Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants regard their own masters as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. So we're going to drill down on this for just a moment. Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants. That's quite a statement here that Paul is making to Timothy. As laborers, we're going to look at these two terms, yoke and bondservant, for just a moment. All right? A yoke, when we think of yoke, we think most often like a yoke of oxen. You know, it'd be a wooden timber of some kind that would be put on an oxen's neck to enable it to pull. But historically, a yoke was not just used for oxen. We as people would have a yoke as well. Have you seen in a movie or maybe in a picture, they show these a lot of times in kids' cartoons, you know, where there'll be a wooden apparatus that a person would put across their shoulders and maybe have a bucket hanging on each end of it. Okay? That is a yoke. The point of that is to enable a person to do more labor with a little less effort to be able to continue that labor for an extended period of time. All of us probably who've done anything with animals have carried buckets, right? I remember when I was a kid, Grandpa carrying buckets of grain or buckets of water or whatever to the animals. And when you picked up one bucket, what do you always do? If you pick up one bucket, what you got to do? You got to pick up another one so that your load is balanced, right? Because it is easier, right? And I agree with this. It is easier to carry two buckets than it is one because you're, tipsy. If you just pick up 2 buckets of water, though, they're nice full buckets of water. You're taking them to your calves at the fair or whatever it might be. As you walk along with those 2 buckets of water, what happens? It's about as much of it ends up on you as is going to end up going to the animal by the end of the day. Well, a yoke helps with that. So the yoke moves the weight out away from your body a little bit, gives you the chance to balance it, puts it up on your shoulders where you can carry it more efficiently. Okay? So Paul is talking about those who are under a yoke as bondservants. Now let's understand this term. The idea of a bondservant is a very ancient idea that has very much a modern application as well. A bondservant is this kind of an idea. I'm in debt. I am so in debt, I have no way, no hope of ever getting myself out of debt in any normal way. So what I do is I go and I find some wealthy person, hopefully somebody of good character, hopefully somebody that I have some previous connection with, and I go to them and I make a contract with them. And in the amongst the Hebrew people, the Israelites, the contract was normally for 7 years. And throughout history, actually, bondservants were often indentured. This was another term for an indentured servant. It was normal to have a 7-year period that someone would be indentured. So this person who was hopelessly in debt would go to someone wealthy and say, I will attach myself to you. I will become your bond servant for these next 7 years if you will pay off my debt. And so the payment would be made then to the debtor, whoever that was. And now my commitment, my contract, is to work for that master for that period of time, whatever it is that we agreed upon, typically for 7 years. All right? Well, what does that have to do with us, right? Because none of us ever do anything like that. We don't ever put ourselves in contracts where we're obligated to somebody for an extended period of time, you know. Like we would never sign a home mortgage that's saying for 30 years that we are going to serve and give all of our money to that bank so that they'll loan us the money to buy that house. No, we would never do anything like that. And we would never go and get a credit card and say that we're going to pay 20% interest so that we can use some of that credit card's money to buy different things that we need, and we're going to pay it back, you know, over the next year, 2, 3, 5, 7, 12. You know, if you make the minimum payment, it's supposed to take something like 20 years to actually pay off a credit card. You know, we would never do anything like that, right? You know, actually, the way we function in our world today, we are very much indentured servants on a regular basis as Americans today. We don't use that term, but we are in debt to somebody. We owe them a portion of our lives on a regular basis. And the contract of labor is that I am going to work for you so that you will pay me so that I can redeem my debts. The contract for labor goes like this. I want to get paid. I've got this debt. I've got a car loan. I've got a home loan. I've got taxes that I have to pay. You know, that's one of the things that just drives me absolutely bonkers. You know, I paid for this house. I paid for this car, all this stuff. I own them free and clear, right? Never. You're going to pay taxes on that car for the whole time that you own it. You're going to pay taxes on that house forever. We've got to pay all of these things. We're all in bondage to these debts that we're going to owe forever. Well, a job is a contract. I want to get paid, and I am willing to do something I wouldn't otherwise do so that you will pay me. Think about that. You know, what kind of person would just voluntarily get up at 7 o'clock in the, or not get up at 7, get to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, to work in the heat, to do a dirty job, to do a nasty job, you know, unless there was something they were wanting to get out of it. We want to get paid. So I'm willing to get up earlier than I would otherwise. I'm willing to work in conditions that I wouldn't otherwise. Now, we could look at all this and say, by the way, Dave, you know, you're not really talking to me in this because, you know, I don't work at an hourly wage or I don't work for a salary or something like that. I'm a farmer. I don't work like that, or I own a business. I don't. Actually, don't we all? For a farmer, we know we're going to be getting up. We've got to get this work done. Nobody else is going to come along and do it. If you're the business owner is never the laziest person in the business, are they? They're usually the hardest working. So we work in the hopes of earning something, to get paid. Okay, so one half of the contract is the worker, I want to get paid. The other half is the boss saying, I need labor. I need someone else's time. I don't have enough time to get everything done that I need to get done. So I'm going to have to pay someone else to do some of that work for me. Right? Now let me give you a little insight. For those of you who've never been on the end of being a boss, running a business, anything like that, all of us who run businesses don't want to have to hire anybody. I don't want to hire anybody. You know why? Because having employees is a pain. You know what they do? They don't show up. They quit and take another job. They call in late. They get sick. They all these. Oh my goodness! It is so much work to have an employee. But I just can't get everything done. When this time of year, King Solomon's not a very good example of employees because there's just Jay and I that are on staff there. But when it comes time for the summer, I need to have about 10 other employees working for me there at the camp because I can't do everything. And so that's why employers are willing to pay someone else. But here's an economics and a biblical truth lesson here real quick. It is only worth having an employee if the value of their labor is greater than the cost of having them. It's just basic economics. If it's not worth having that employee for the amount of money they bring in, then it's not worth having that employee. Do you know what's worse than not having an employee? Having a bad employee. Because you're paying them, and oftentimes this work still isn't getting done. Think of it this way. Okay, you go to McDonald's. Okay, not that I recommend anybody, don't go to McDonald's, but you go to McDonald's, okay? When you go to McDonald's, what do you want? Food. I want a hamburger. I want some fries. I want a drink. You want all of those things. Okay, today, if you go into McDonald's just about anywhere in the U.S., you used to walk up to the counter and say, hey, I want a double cheeseburger, I want a large fry, and I want a large Coke. Okay, today, you don't do that, right? Because what you do today is you go up to a kiosk, and what used to take you 30 seconds to order your meal at McDonald's, now there's 6 kiosks, 6 big signs there, and you start pushing buttons on that thing. And every button I push goes wrong. I don't know about you guys, but every button I push goes wrong, and I'm wanting a double cheeseburger, and instead it's giving me a Big Mac or whatever, and I hate it. You know what I want? I want somebody that I can look right in the eye, and I'll wait in line to talk to that one person who's actually taking orders. You know why McDonald's did that? Because they did a simple math computation. Said it is going to cost more to hire more people than it is to put in a bunch of these machines. When we are working, when we have a job, doesn't matter what it is, where it is, okay, we are in this contract where we are wanting something. I want to get paid. I want benefits, all these things. But the employer is looking to get something too. They're wanting labor. They want help. They want somebody to get a job done. Okay? And the point of that labor agreement, that contract, is that both sides need to benefit. Now, here's what a contract as a worker is not. Number one, it is not a plan for wealth redistribution. Okay, now maybe y'all never heard this, but there is a huge thing going on in our nation today where the expectation as a worker is for wealth redistribution. You know, we've got people that have so much, they're so rich, you know, they ought to be sharing that with other people. And so the idea of having a job in people's minds is it's a way to get some of that wealth that somebody else has. And friends, that's not even a biblical idea, let alone a reasonable economic idea. We'll see that in just a minute here. I'll elaborate on that just a little further. But a job is not a plan for wealth redistribution. Secondly, it is not a lifestyle guarantee. Okay? So years ago, I was on a missions trip. This is a missions trip. We're going to Africa to go and work with an orphanage in Africa. Okay? So in my head, I am all about taking care of kids. Okay? I expect that everybody else on this trip is going with that same mindset. We're going there to help kids who have no parents. Okay? So we get over to Africa, and I run into roadblocks all over the place with the different people that I'm traveling with. But about halfway through this trip, one young lady that's in our group starts complaining. Okay? She is a waitress. And she is complaining about what awful tippers we are in America. Okay? Industry standard, she says, is 18%. All of us have a moral obligation in her mind to tip at least 18%. Now, I've already worn out my welcome on this trip. I've already made so many people mad. I don't even have the room to even start to debate with her and tell her what a dad's perspective on that would be. But she's talking about 18%, and as she starts to unpack why, she's saying things like, well, for me to live in the area I want to live, it costs this much. For me to have the car, it's going to cost me this much. I need something more like 25% on all the meals I serve to support that. Friends, no, that's not what a job is. A job is not a guarantee of a certain level of support so you can maintain a certain lifestyle. What a job is a contract where what I'm getting paid needs to produce more value for my employer than what I'm getting paid. Again, I will elaborate on this just a little further. But if what I'm making in my job, whatever it might be, if it's not maintaining the lifestyle that I want, then my obligation is then to, I don't know, find a new career, make a plan that's going to accomplish what I want to accomplish, begin preparing myself, but it's probably going to take change. It's probably going to take a higher level of commitment and responsibility than what I have right now. And those things go together from a biblical perspective. Doesn't that sound weird? I feel weird giving these ideas, saying that they're biblical ideas, but they are, because look at this, okay? And again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I can't not. Let all who are under yoke as bondservants, so that's what we've been talking about so far, regard their own masters as worthy of all honor, so the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. Okay, we'll talk about that here in just a second. Those who have believing masters must not be disrespectful on the grounds that they are brothers. Rather, they must serve all the better, since those who benefit. See, the idea here is saying that when we work for someone, that employer should benefit from us being an employee. They should be better off because I'm there. I'm not only making money for myself, I'm making money for them as well. That's the whole idea of labor in a free market society, but it's a biblical idea. Okay, let's keep going on here, though. The main point. Number one, we've been talking about the contract of labor and what that looks like from a biblical perspective. Number two, the character of labor. See, who we are as workers becomes very evident. You've all seen this in places you work. You can see the people that are putting their heart into it, and then you can see the people that are just clock watchers. The ones who are looking to get out of things just as quickly as we can. The second half of verse 1 there once again. Regard your masters as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. In our work, we show who our real boss is. in our work, we show who our real boss is. Maybe it's money. For some people, it's very evident that their boss is money. They're only working to get that paycheck. And if they have a chance to jump to a different job to make another $2 an hour, man, they're going to be all over that, because the point of it is to make money. And I understand that. Labor is about earning a living. Sometimes we've got to do that. But sometimes it becomes really clear, and especially when we call ourselves by the name Christian, and when we're very overt about the fact that we are Christians, it becomes very clear if money is who our real boss is. Secondly, sometimes in our work we show that our real boss is self. I've been around people, I've worked with people who were really good at getting other people to do their jobs for them. And it becomes very evident very quickly that they're in it for what they get for themselves, and they're willing to make everybody else's life worse to defend themselves. But also, I would say it's very clear in our work when our real boss is Christ. When we're working with Christ as our master. When we look at everything that we have, all the provision, everything that we're earning, and we say our real provider is Jesus. I'm not saying that means we're supposed to live on less and you're living on faith. That's not my point here. But even when you're making good money, are we looking at that and saying, Christ has provided that? He is my master. He is my Lord. He is the one who has given me the understanding to be able to do this job. Christ is my master. And Christ is my standard. I'm going to work the way Jesus calls me to work. Sometimes that is just a simple statement of, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do my best. Sometimes that's a statement of, I'm going to do something that may be unpopular because it's what's right. Had an elder in our church in Houston, dear friend, man I respected incredibly. He was a lawyer. He was a big shot lawyer with an oil company. And he and his wife told me that about once a week, he comes home and he'll say to his wife, well, I made a decision today that could get me fired. Once a week. And they just understood that was going to be part of what his job was. Are you willing to make decisions that could get you fired? In a good way? Because of your character, because of who you are? Because Christ is really the boss. Now, what if your boss is a jerk? Okay, what if your boss is just a bad guy? What if your boss is dishonest? What if your boss takes advantage of people or whatever? Then do you have the right to be subversive then, to undercut them, to talk bad about? Years ago, I was working for a church, and I've told parts of this story before, but I was working for a church, and the leadership team of that church had a meeting about me, without me, and without my boss. And they did an evaluation of me based upon their memory of a job description that they did not have in front of them, and without a reasonable, tangible way to evaluate me in that process. I was mad. But I had a pretty good job. I was living in a place that we really liked. We liked our home. We had a little bit of land. It was kind of one of those dream come true kind of a situations. You don't want to mess that up, right? What if your boss is mistreating you, doing what's wrong? And I came to this conclusion, and maybe this will apply for some of you in decision making, maybe some of you out there in Internetville, maybe this will apply for some of you. I came to the conclusion that I had to respect or remove, okay? And what that played out for me was I either had to be able to respect the people I worked with and show them that respect. I'm looking at some of my military friends here. I got to be able to salute with a whole heart. Okay? So I'm either going to respect or I'm going to remove myself. Because I am not going to be okay as a person, as a Christian, as a man trying to live with character. I am not going to be okay staying in a situation where I don't respect the people that are over me. And I can't find a way to do it. And so I tried in that situation to find a way to show respect, to be respectful, to be respected. I tried to work through all of that, and I finally decided, okay, I've got to remove myself. Because it's not good for the church, it's not good for me, it's not good for our leadership team if we're not all together. So the character of labor matters. Okay, third big point here. What if that person I'm working with is a co-worker for Christ? Okay, verse 2 here. Those who have believing masters. Okay, that's the idea that a Christian is working for another Christian. You know, I'm working for somebody that shows me honor and respect and love as a fellow Christian. It's somebody who, when they see that my family is hurting, that there's a moment of crisis, there's a health issue or whatever, somebody who will let me take care of my family first, knowing that it's only if I take care of my family that I can be a good worker at my job. You know, if I'm in a situation where I'm being cared for and so on, those who have believing masters must not be disrespectful on the ground that they are brothers. In other words, don't be taking advantage of that fact that someone is treating you with kindness, love, honor, respect. Rather, they must serve all the better, since those who benefit by their good service are believers and beloved. You know, I've had employees who have tried to take advantage of my good nature. I've had it many times. Different places, different states. You know, I've never had more employees than what I have at King Solomon. You know, I have somewhere around a dozen employees most years at the camp, and for the most part, they're phenomenal people. You know, they serve so much, and they give, and they're there for all the right reasons, and so I try to give lots of slack. You know, one of my employees this year needed to go home every morning to walk her steer to get ready for the fair. And man, I was going to be all in support of that because I'm in favor of Earl, you know, the steer. That was the steer's name. And you know, hey, we want to do that when we got good people, you know. But I've also had some who wanted to take advantage of that good nature. Had a guy that worked for me years ago. He was an intern. And interns need to be there for the kids and completely for the kids. And if I let this guy get out of my eyesight, and I mean that literally, he was either on his phone or reading a book, ignoring the kids completely. And I talked with him, and I talked with him, and I talked with him about, you know, hey, these are my expectations. I need you to follow through on them. In the middle of the summer, we did an evaluation with him, and I said, things have to change. And what I should have done is just said, hey, you're done, go on home. Sometimes employees want to take advantage of that. I had another employee that just wanted to argue with me all the time. He thought he knew better than me about how things ought to happen. You know? No, not okay. It's not okay to take advantage of somebody's kindness. Okay? And it is okay for your employer to benefit because you are an employee. A few years ago, we were having trouble at camp, and one of the big problems that we would have at camp when I first went there almost 20 years ago now is we would have sewer lines that got clogged up. And some of you have heard some of these stories before, and oh man, it's a terrible thing when you've got 100 people at camp and the main sewer line is clogged, because that messes with everybody's life, you know. And began to figure out some of what was going on, and I decided I needed to replace the whole sewer line going from the bathhouse with about a dozen toilets in it, you know, a dozen showers, sinks, everything. That main line from there going down to the septic system needed to be replaced. And so I figured it all out. I planned how it was going to work, went out, bought all the materials, hauled them with my own vehicles, and got all the materials there. Then I went out and I rented a trencher, hauled it with my own vehicle, got that trencher back to camp, trenched in a whole new line. Praise the Lord, since the day that we did that, We have not had a major clog in that line. I figured, thank you very much, I appreciate the knocking on wood right there. I figured that was somewhere around a $20,000 job that we did for the camp. And it cost the camp maybe $1,500. That's only right. That's only right. You know, it would be wrong for me to then go to the camp and say, hey, I saved you $18,500. Pony up. You know? Number one, they're not going to have it. It doesn't matter how much I say it. You know, the only way the job was going to get done was if I got it done, and that's why they hire somebody like me to get the job done. It's okay for the employer to benefit beyond what they're paying. That's the only way that it's reasonable for them to have employees. The reason we do all this, though, is so that the world can see Christ through us. There is nowhere that our witness is bigger to those who may not know Jesus than what it is at work. So work is a chance to bear testimony to Jesus, or it could be the undue influence of a bad example. Because if I wear the name of Christ upon me, and I try to wear it on me all the time, maybe not written down, but in who I am and how I carry myself. If I wear the name of Christ all the time, my neighbors, and especially my co-workers, can't help but see that. And so when they see me working hard for the glory of Christ, they can't miss it. And when I'm working for my own glory, they can't help but see that as well. Hey, one of the least fun sermons I've done in a while, but one of the most obvious things the world around us sees. We're going to sing a song of invitation here. It's number 462 there in your hymnals. And we're going to sing verses 1 and 4 here as we finish up our service today. I'm a couple of minutes late. I owe you a few minutes. I apologize for that. We'll make up for it next week, and I'll go longer yet, okay? Would you all stand with me, please? Number 462. We'll do